I'd like to share an experience I had with a game of Team Fortress 2. It was about 9 p.m. on a Monday, I think 2 weeks ago, and I had decided to play a multiplayer match of TF2. I signed on and started up the automatic server selection for play modes. I felt like playing Capture the Flag, so I selected that option. My computer lagged for a bit while I was searching for a server, which isn't abnormal for me because my laptop is fairly distant from my router, but eventually it found one. I've only been playing TF2 since a little after it became free, so I don't have a very big server history, nor experience with server mods or servers in general. I've only been playing TF2 since a little after it became free, so I don't have a very big server history, nor experience with server mods or servers in general. But something seemed rather odd about this particular server. Once I gained access to the server, and the loading screen came up with the bar on the bottom right, as the bar got to about 70%, it jittered backwards and paused. It started going back and forth between 45 to 60%. The game froze after a few minutes, and I decided to force quit the game. I went to get something to eat and came back to the game, started it up, and decided to play from my server history. I noticed a new server was added to the list. TF Play Dead 905, or something along that line. After the events I'm about to explain, the server disappeared from my list, so I'm just going to plan on memory here. I tried the server and, similar to before, the load bar jittered a bit. However, it managed to complete this time. Usually when you enter a custom server, there will be some sort of splash page to welcome you to the server and advertise their site or briefly explain the rules. In the case of this server, the entire splash page was black. There was nothing on it. I started to think something was wrong with my graphics card with all of the strange things that was happening, but decided to continue on. The game loaded. I selected Pyro as my class, and I entered TwoFort. For those of you who never played Team Fortress 2, here is a brief explanation. It's a team-based online FPS multiplayer game, and in this particular Capture the Flag mode map, TwoFort, you have two fairly large mills separated by a little lagoon and a bridge, and an underground network of pipes that you can enter. The objective is, obviously, to capture the opponent's flag and return it to your base. For this server, there were 2 teams of 6. Upon my joining, both teams were full. The game was already mid-progress, and everything was working normally. Our team, Blue, had already scored 1 point, and we needed 2 more to win the game. The red team had 0 points. This particular game didn't have a time limit, and we seemed to be going back and forth for about 14 minutes with little to no progress. Occasionally, members from our team would type angry messages to the opposing team accusing them of being cheap by having 4 engineers in their flag room with turrets, making it almost impossible to get their flag and making the game seem endless. Up until now, things have been relatively normal, until I started noticing that for about 5 minutes, I've been going around the level and I have not seen a single one of my team members. Nor have any players from the other team. People were still talking, however, so it took kind of a while for that to sink in that I haven't seen anyone at all for almost 5 minutes. I thought that it had to be some sort of lag problem, so I asked the other players if they have seen the same issues, and the general response was, nope. But the one player said they haven't seen me for a bit either. Around 6 more minutes passed, and I started to grow pretty bored. I decided to make one more round throughout the level before I'd find another server. I left our fort and fell into the lagoon in the middle and proceeded to enter the red team's pipe network. After the little room underground in the middle of the tunnel, there was a really long pipe that led to a staircase going up to the base at the end. I noticed that the enemy scout was standing there, but he wasn't moving. Just standing there with his bat out and staring at me. A strange form of relief swept over me that the game started to work again, and I charged at him and began to shoot him with my flare gun. The shots went right through him, and when I approached, he completely disappeared. Really bad lag, I thought to myself. I ascended the staircase, and I entered the base. A strange static sound started to replace the other game sounds. I made my way throughout the base, and as I got closer to the flag room, the static grew louder and louder until I couldn't hear anything else in the game at all. This is when things started to get really weird. I asked if anyone else heard the static, and I did not receive any reply. No one has said a word since I saw the enemy scout in the pipe tunnel. I managed to get into the room adjacent to the flag room, with 2 halls going into it, and I could hear some sort of murmuring behind the static. As I went down into one of the halls and turned the corner, I noticed that there was no flag room. It was plain black, like the hall leading to the game's void, where all the textures and lighting were reduced to 100% black. I shot a couple times and my bullets landed as if there were walls there, so I entered the room anyway. I saw the flag and picked it up, and when I turned around to leave, there were no halls. Everything was black. The UI was still up on the screen. It said I had their flag, but there was nothing to level, and all traces of that level disappeared. I tried again to get an answer after explaining my problem. No response. I stood in the room, or lack thereof, for about 3 minutes, until suddenly the game froze and the game ended, but the message didn't say anyone had won or lost, and the announcer's voice was all distorted. The scoreboard was broken. The loading screen quickly came up and it said, "Downloading player dead 0090, or something along that line. It took about 17 minutes to download. It was a really big file. When it was finished, the black screen server came up again. I went through the screens and selected Spy. The level loaded to something completely indescribable. I tried to save a screenshot, but every picture I tried to get said error, and print screen didn't work. The level looked rather black and white and very glitchy. The textures on the walls were some kind of 8-bit blocks, but really distorted. It was almost like playing in a 3D version of a static snow screen on TV. I went through the level and asked everyone, "What is this map?" But there was no response again. I checked the players list, and other than my name, everyone else was listed as I am dead 1, I am dead 2, I am dead 3, etc. I've never encountered anything like this before, other than some prank games people made for fun and hacks along the lines of that Majora's Mask one, but this is an online game with what I had thought had secure servers. I decided to give it a few more minutes and explore the level, which was a really large maze of very oddly shaped tunnels. Also, there was no sound effects whatsoever. Nothing I did caused a sound. I eventually came to a really long tunnel with what I imagined was the middle of the level. The tunnel had darkness at its end, and it seemed almost endless, and as I was walking around for at least a minute in one direction with no change to the map, I decided to turn around and go back thinking the map is glitched, and the moment I turned my camera around, I saw the enemy scout I saw earlier. Except something was very wrong with it. His eyes were black, his left arm was rather deformed and bent in impossible directions, and his legs reminded me of a crab. I almost jumped out of my seat at the sight and typed, "What the fuck is going on?" hurriedly in the chat log, but there was no response. I stood there and stared down at the strange scout. After the several moments, the other players started talking, but all that appeared was corrupted garbage text. The scout quickly approached me in a sudden, though irregular fashion, and I heard a very, very loud burst of static, and all of a sudden it kicked me out of the server. I went to check the server, and it was gone from my history. Naturally, I immediately shut off the game, and haven't played it since. I think there was some sort of prank, but it was pretty creepy, and the game hacks don't usually creep me out that much. Update, July 13th, 2011. After posting this, I decided to play the game again. I went into my server history to find a King of the Hill map, but I noticed that CTF Play Dead 905 was back, but this time it had 0 out of 16 players. I went into the server and, unlike before, it loaded normally without any issues. It was TwoFort, like when I had entered it before, but there were no players in the server. Nothing seemed really out of place, and I walked around the map for a while, finding nothing. The only thing I noticed that was strange was that I could hear the sound effects glitch out every now and then. When selecting a character, there was a static noise that kept repeating, and when I went to the tunnel area, I thought I heard footsteps. I shut down the game a few minutes later, and I will try it again another time. Maybe I will be able to get some footage. So that was Team Fortress 2 Play Dead by Blue Falcon. This is one I remember pretty fondly. I was really desperate for trying to find TF2 creepypastas back in the day because those were some of my favorite things when I was growing up. Now, does this one make the landing? Is this what you want to show people for TF2 creepypastas? No, not at all, not really. I think it's like mostly competently written. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's just not very scary. Like, you found kind of a weird scout NPC, it chased you, and there's like a spooky server, which that happens all the time. Like, it's not really something that's exceptionally scary. Something that's very interesting about this story is that the narrator isn't very familiar with TF2. He uses a lot of terminology that isn't really in the game's lexicon, like describing it as the flag instead of the briefcase, the intelligence. He's not super familiar with the maps, which I think does help the story in trying to match the exploration the author has with the audience. Like, you get to learn the game alongside him if you aren't familiar with TF2. But I've played that game for over 2,000 hours. I'm very familiar with TwoFort and TF2. Also, hilarious that this story said the servers were secure because it was an online game, which you've played TF2 in the last, 4 years. You'll know is not the case because Valve doesn't care about it. This wasn't a bad story at all. It was alright. There aren't a lot of TF2 creepypastas, so you do have to be kind of pick and choosy. But I wouldn't drop everything to go ahead and read it right away. It was all right. It wasn't anything special. But I am curious to what you guys think. I know there's a lot of creepy TF2 content now, and I do think that inadvertently the story helped move things along. I'm not saying that this was the inspiration for Emesis Blue or anything, but just existing was enough. This story walked so Emesis Blue could run, sort of, kinda, spiritually, in a way. But I'm curious, does anyone have a TF2 horror project they'd recommend, and what were your thoughts on the story? I'd love to hear. But until then, have a lovely rest of your day.